May 21, 1940, northern France. The battlefield was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that always comes right before something goes terribly wrong. A German Panzer III commander leaned into his cupola sights, spotting a strange, heavy British tank rolling slowly across the wheat field. His crew had already destroyed a dozen light French tanks that morning. This one looked no different. Another easy kill, or so they thought. He gave the order. The 37mm gun fired. The shell screamed across the field, then sparked off the British tank's armor and shot into the sky. The Matilda didn't even flinch. Load again. The next round bounced off too. By the third shot, the British tank was only 400 meters away, its 2-pounder gun locked onto the German position. Panic hit fast. Radio calls shook with fear. We cannot penetrate. We cannot penetrate. This same scene played out again and again across Arras. German crews, who had spent 3 weeks smashing through Europe with confidence, suddenly faced a tank their weapons simply couldn't hurt. Some crews emptied every shell they had, watching all of them ricochet helplessly into the air. One Panzer III fired 17 rounds at a single Matilda. None broke through. The British tank calmly destroyed it and moved on. What terrified the Germans wasn't just the armor, it was the complete shock. Their entire doctrine was built on speed, aggression, and the belief that enemy tanks would fall quickly. The Matilda shattered that belief in minutes. Its armor was the reason. The Matilda II carried 78mm of frontal protection, nearly 3 times thicker than a Panzer III. The German 37mm Pak 36 couldn't penetrate it even at point-blank range. Even newer guns, like the 50mm Pak 38, struggled unless the range was extremely close and conditions perfect. The Panzer IV's short-barrel gun wasn't designed for armor penetration at all. Nothing worked. German crews tried everything: tracks, vision slits, even ramming, but nothing stopped the British tank. Stuka dive bombers were called in, but well-camouflaged Matildas were hard targets. Infantry support was useless. Anti-tank rifles and machine guns might as well have been pebbles. By nightfall, the psychological damage was complete. German reports described the tank as impenetrable and invulnerable. Some tank crews even abandoned their vehicles and ran. Fewer than 100 Matildas were in France, but they created fear far beyond their numbers. The truth behind this unstoppable tank came from a very British idea. Unlike other nations that designed fast, mobile tanks, Britain developed 2 separate categories. Infantry tanks, slow, heavily armored, built to protect foot soldiers. Cruiser tanks, fast, lighter, made for flanking and breakthroughs. The Matilda II came from the infantry tank concept. Military thinkers like Hugh Elles and Percy Hobart believed infantry needed a moving shield, something that could crawl forward through gunfire, destroy bunkers, and survive anything the enemy shot back. Speed wasn't required. Soldiers walked, so the tank only needed to keep up with them. The earlier Matilda I followed this idea but had major flaws, so in 1936 designers began working on its replacement. Under specification A12, the Matilda II took shape. Maximum armor, reliable engines, a strong 2-pounder gun, and no concern for speed. Its single-piece cast hull was revolutionary and extremely tough. At 27 tons, powered by twin diesel engines, it topped out at just 24 kilometers per hour. But the Matilda wasn't built for the fast, open battles it would face in 1940. Its creators imagined something else entirely. Slow, grinding assaults against fixed German defenses, trench by trench, bunker by bunker, just like the previous war. And that is exactly where the story of the Matilda leads next. From the moment the Matilda rolled into battle, its small 2-pounder gun seemed enough for its intended job: bunkers, machine gun nests, and fortified trenches. But history changed the script. The war that arrived in 1939 was fast, fluid, and nothing like the static battles Britain had prepared for. And on May 21, 1940, outside the French town of Arras, the Matilda found itself in the very type of mobile tank combat its designers never expected. By this point, German blitzkrieg had torn through France. Panzer divisions were racing toward the Channel, threatening to trap the entire British expeditionary force. Morale was collapsing. The retreat looked unstoppable. But someone chose to strike back. Major General Harold Franklin scraped together whatever he could. 2 infantry battalions and 74 tanks from the 4th and 7th Royal Tank Regiments. Only 58 of those tanks were Matildas, and just 16 were the heavily armored Matilda II, the same tanks that had shocked German cruise days before. The plan was simple. Drive south from Arras, cut German supply lines, slow the advance, and buy time for evacuation. No one expected victory. A few hours of delay would be enough. At 2 p.m., the attack began, and immediately fell apart. Infantry lagged behind. Artillery never arrived. Air support never appeared. French forces on the flank collapsed. By all logic, the British should have cancelled the attack. Instead, the Matildas kept going, straight toward Rommel's 7th Panzer Division. What followed stunned both sides. The Matildas smashed through German lines like farm machinery through dry stalks. Anti-tank guns fired desperately. Their shells bounced away in showers of sparks. Panzer IIIs and IVs tried to engage at close range but failed. Their shots simply ricocheted. One Matilda took 14 hits. Another survived 17. None penetrated. Meanwhile, the Matilda's 2-pounder guns, though small, tore through German armor with ease. Vehicles burned. Positions collapsed. German infantry broke and ran. Crews abandoned tanks. Rommel's own war diary recorded: heavy enemy tank attack, situation critical. In army language, that meant panic. Rommel even grabbed a field artillery battery and personally ordered fire onto the British tanks. But the shells failed to break through. German losses climbed, hundreds killed or wounded, dozens of vehicles destroyed. Some later reports claimed nearly 200 German vehicles were knocked out that afternoon, though historians still debate the exact numbers. The psychological impact mattered even more than the damage. 4 hours, German high command lost contact with Rommel. Reports came in of massive British armor formations, possibly hundreds of tanks, maybe an entire armored corps. In reality, the chaos had been caused by just 16 Matilda IIs. Some historians believe this shock helped influence Hitler's infamous halt order 3 days later, pausing the German advance toward Dunkirk. If such powerful British tanks were operating behind German lines, perhaps the Panzer divisions were overextended. Whether the Matildas directly caused that decision remains uncertain, but they certainly added fear and doubt at a crucial moment. Had the Germans pushed immediately, the British evacuation might have been crushed before it began. But the Matildas couldn't keep going forever. Days of non-stop fighting broke them down. Reinforced German units arrived with heavier guns. Fuel ran low. Ammunition ran out. By nightfall, the remaining Matildas withdrew. Most would be abandoned during the retreat toward Dunkirk. The larger strategic picture stayed bleak. But the legend was born. And the Matilda's next chapter unfolded thousands of miles away, beneath the burning sun of North Africa, where the tank would become even more dominant than it had at Arras. By late 1940, Italy had invaded Egypt with over 200,000 troops. Britain had barely 36,000 to oppose them. The situation looked hopeless, until someone counted the tanks. Among Britain's thin desert forces were 50 Matilda IIs from the 7th Royal Tank Regiment. Italy, meanwhile, fielded hundreds of M11 and M13 tanks, machines that looked respectable on paper but failed in practice. Their armor was thin and poorly made, their riveted hulls sent deadly fragments inward when hit, and their guns struggled to penetrate even light British tanks. Against a Matilda, they were helpless. Operation Compass began on December 9, 1940. General Richard O'Connor planned to use the Matildas as unstoppable battering rams, smashing Italian strongpoints while faster cruisers exploited the breaches. At dawn, the Matildas attacked Nebewa. Italian guns fired wildly. Nothing worked. M13 tanks tried to counterattack. Their rounds bounced off like stones off a ship's hull. Within hours, the camp collapsed. Over 4,000 Italians surrendered. Not a single Matilda was lost to enemy fire. And this pattern repeated again and again. At Tummer West, the Matildas crushed another fortified camp. At Sidi Barani, an entire Italian corps broke apart. Some Italian units surrendered before the British even arrived. Rumors of invincible British tanks spreading faster than the Matildas themselves. Italian anti-tank crews discovered their 47mm guns required perfect, close-range side shots to even scratch a Matilda. Frontal shots were suicide. By mid-December, the Italian army was in full retreat. O'Connor's forces pushed forward relentlessly, the Matildas leading the charge. At Bardia, 45,000 Italians surrendered. At Tobruk, another 25,000. The Matildas seemed unstoppable. Some Italian soldiers began calling them tigers. In just 2 months, Britain's small desert force advanced 800 kilometers, destroyed 10 Italian divisions, and captured over 130,000 prisoners, while suffering minimal losses. Most Matilda casualties came from mechanical failures, not enemy action. One tank reportedly survived over 100 direct hits in the entire campaign. For Italian crews, facing a Matilda wasn't a battle, it was hopeless. But this overwhelming British success forced Germany to intervene. Hitler could not allow Italy to collapse completely. And so, in February 1941, Erwin Rommel arrived in North Africa with the first elements of the Deutsches Afrika Korps, bringing Panzer IIIs, Panzer IVs, veteran crews, and a new challenge that would soon test the Matilda's legend like never before. The Matildas had just shown they were almost untouchable. Every German tank gun in North Africa failed against them, and Rommel needed an answer fast. That answer already existed, though no one had imagined using it this way. It was the 88mm Flak gun, a massive anti-aircraft weapon built to destroy high-flying bombers. Nearly 2.5 meters tall, firing a heavy shell at extreme speed, it was famous for long-range accuracy. On paper, it was complete overkill for ground targets. But desperation can turn theory into opportunity. The 88's origin stretched back to the late 1920s, when Krupp quietly worked with Swedish engineers to get around Versailles Treaty limits. By the mid-1930s, the Flak 18 had become one of the world's best anti-aircraft guns. During the Spanish Civil War, a few crews tried it against bunkers and captured tanks, discovering it sliced through armor with ease, but those lessons weren't widely shared. Anti-air guns were too valuable to risk on the ground. Until the Matilda forced the issue. In April 1941, near Halfaya Pass, German anti-tank guns again failed to stop British tanks. Frustrated, Rommel ordered flak batteries to the front line. The gun crews thought the order was madness. The 88 was huge, slow to set up, easy to spot, and had almost no protection. Then the Matildas appeared. At 1,500 meters, the first 88mm rounds hit. And for the first time, British tanks stopped. There were no ricochets, no sparks. The shells punched straight through the Matilda's thick armor and out the back. Tanks halted mid-advance, smoke pouring from them. The weapon that once defended German cities had become Rommel's most feared tank killer. The numbers explained everything. At 1000 m, it could pierce over 110 millimeters of armor. At 500 m, it could defeat even heavier plates. It remained deadly far beyond normal battle ranges. The weapon wasn't perfect. It needed a large crew, took minutes to prepare, and its tall silhouette made it an obvious target. But despite these weaknesses, the 88 ended the Matilda's period of immunity. While German firepower finally caught up, the tank itself was already suffering from internal flaws. The Matilda's thick armor made it slow and extremely heavy. In the desert heat, its twin diesel engines overheated, clogged, and wore out. Sand invaded every moving part despite constant maintenance. Suspension components cracked on rough terrain. Unit reports from early 1941 show that 1/3 of all Matildas were often out of action due to mechanical problems, not enemy fire. The gun was another major limitation. The 2-pounder had been effective early in the war, but by mid-1941 it lacked stopping power against newer German tanks. Even worse, it had no high-explosive shells, leaving British crews almost helpless against anti-tank guns or infantry positions. And because of the tank's small turret ring, upgrading to a larger weapon was impossible. Speed was an equally serious issue. The Matilda's slow pace prevented it from keeping up with faster British cruisers or motorized infantry. In mobile desert battles, it simply couldn't maneuver or exploit breakthroughs. German commanders quickly adapted, ignoring the Matilda when possible, defeating lighter British tanks first, then circling back with 88s when the Matilda had no way to escape. The weaknesses became even clearer in new theaters. In Greece, narrow mountain roads, weak bridges, and steep passes overstressed the heavy tanks. Many broke down or were left behind during the retreat. The Far East seemed like a better match. Japanese tanks were thinly armored, lightly armed, and no threat to a Matilda. But jungle warfare brought its own problems. The dense terrain trapped heavy vehicles in mud, limited visibility, and made movement painfully slow. Japanese infantry often bypassed Matildas completely, attacking softer targets. Heat and humidity caused engines to seize, electrics to fail, and metal parts to rust rapidly. Yet in certain roles, the Matilda still excelled. Australian forces in New Guinea and Bougainville used them effectively against fortified Japanese positions. Against bunkers and emplacements, their armor allowed crews to get close and fire with near-total safety. Japanese anti-tank guns simply couldn't penetrate them. The Matilda's story was shifting. Once unbeatable, then outmatched, it had become a specialist machine, formidable in limited roles, but no longer the centerpiece of British armored warfare. The psychological impact on Japanese troops echoed what Italians had felt in North Africa. Japanese infantry using anti-tank rifles watched their shots bounce harmlessly off Matilda armor before being driven back by machine gun fire. But tank-on-tank battles in the Pacific were uncommon. Japan's armored doctrine focused on supporting infantry rather than massed armored formations, so their tanks usually operated in scattered groups. When clashes did happen, Japanese vehicles stood little chance. The 2-pounder easily punched through their thin armor at any practical range. At Milne Bay in 1942, Australian Matildas knocked out multiple Japanese tanks without losses, a pattern repeated throughout the New Guinea campaign. Yet these victories highlighted a deeper truth. The Matilda was excessive for fighting light Japanese armor, but still poorly adapted to almost everything else in the Pacific. In Burma, during the British 14th Army's advance in 1944-45, Matildas again worked well in narrow, tactical roles, breaking bunkers or defending fixed positions, but struggled in fast-moving operations. Monsoon mud, jungle tracks, and constant mechanical strain meant their usefulness was limited. By mid-1945, Shermans and Churchills were replacing them, and British service with Matildas ended soon after. Australia kept a few operational until 1946 before retiring them as well. Despite its declining role, the Matilda had already reshaped German thinking years earlier. Its thick armor forced Germany to overhaul anti-tank doctrine and accelerate gun development. The 37mm Pak-36, nicknamed the Doorknocker for its inability to harm heavy armor, was suddenly inadequate. The Pak-38 entered service in 1940 as a partial answer, but even it struggled frontally against Matildas except at close distance. This urgency drove the rapid creation of the 75mm Pak-40 in 1941, a gun finally capable of defeating heavy armor at respectable ranges. The Matilda also revealed a critical insight. Weapons built for high-altitude air defense could be terrifyingly effective against tanks. The success of the 88mm gun inspired new German vehicles designed specifically around these high-velocity weapons. Tank destroyers like the Ferdinand/Elephant and Nashorn mounted improved 88s, while the Tiger I incorporated a refined version as its main gun. These weren't stopgap conversions, they were purpose-built, shaped by lessons first learned in North Africa. German armored design evolved in parallel. The Panzer III received a 50mm gun, the Panzer IV was upgunned with a long barrel 75mm, and armor thickness increased across the board. Germany began building tanks to counter a future Matilda, even though Britain had already moved to newer designs. Tactically, German forces refined ambush doctrine, using layered anti-tank defenses, concealment, and controlled fire to channel enemy armor into kill zones. These methods later helped when facing Soviet heavy tanks. The arms race that the Matilda unintentionally kicked off pushed both sides forward. Britain countered German improvements with the 17-pounder, leading to the Sherman Firefly and Challenger. Germany responded with the Panther and other high-velocity designs. By war's end, tank guns could pierce double the Matilda's armor at far greater range, and armor protection had advanced beyond anything the Matilda's 2-pounder could threaten. Decades later, the core dilemma remains unchanged: the triangle of protection, firepower, and mobility. Enhance two, and the third weakens. The Matilda prioritized armor and modest firepower at the expense of speed. It excelled until enemies deployed weapons that nullified its protection. Then its slow pace became a fatal flaw. Modern tanks still reflect this tension. Israel's Merkava focuses on crew survivability with heavy modular armor and front-mounted engines, but unlike the Matilda, it combines this with a modern gun, advanced sensors, and active protection systems to maintain workable mobility. The American Abrams takes the opposite path, emphasizing speed and long-range engagement to avoid being hit rather than absorbing hits. Both philosophies succeed only in environments suited to their strengths, another echo of the Matilda's mixed fortunes. The cyclical nature of tank warfare that began in 1940 continues today. One side gains an advantage, better armor, deadlier guns, smarter sensors, then the other counters with new weapons or tactics. Reactive armor prompts tandem charge warheads. Active protection systems lead to top attack missiles or saturation tactics. Each innovation triggers the next. In many ways, the technological momentum that started when the Matilda first shrugged off German shells still shapes armored warfare 80 years later.